Welcome to Tip That Scale, where we talk about layoffs, the job market, and so much more in the world of work. Ron's back, and just in time to talk about the dreaded applicant tracking system, or ATS. But first, we needed to address the elephant in the room, and that elephant is COVID. Well, hello, Mr. Brantley.
Well, hello, my friends. How are y'all?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm way better than I was. I still have some blurry vision issues that I didn't have prior to this. It's getting better, so obviously I think it's fading off. But like reading things, it just takes a little time to focus. But the worst part was the back stuff. I mean, I thought I had COVID before. I've never felt like somebody
This
just
one
take my
was,
back and
yeah.
bending it backwards and breaking it every time I would get up. It was miserable, but I'm so much better now.
What's messed up for me is like I knew exactly when I got it, and so I was like, whatever. Very next day, I couldn't get out of bed. Everything was just achy. Like when I was trying to open my eyes, but I don't feel sick.
They say, it'll affect areas that you've injured before. So any of those, it kind of flares up. But I never had fever. I did lose my sense of smell and taste about 3, 4 days in. So it finally has come back.
Had you had it before?
No, I thought I had it once before because one of my kids had it and I felt some symptoms and had some fever, but I didn't test because she had tested positive. I just assumed. But if I did, it didn't feel like this. So I've never had anything feel like that, which leads me to believe I may not have had it before.
Well, so I've had it before, and it wasn't this bad.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
kind of like what you said, you're back with like old injuries. My knee is like that, and that's where I felt that really sharp pain, and like almost gave out on me. And the next day, I went down.
It was just brutal.
It's an interesting topic. I know that we're talking about applicant tracking systems today, but this is a consideration for companies that are requiring people to come back to the office. I shared it on LinkedIn that I was on a webinar with Health Action Alliance, and they were talking about how to keep employees safe when you're doing the return to office. Understanding that you both have recently gotten a taste of COVID again, that's something that I wonder if companies are really considering, the fact that it's still out there and it affects people pretty harshly. It can put you on your butt. How many days were you down, Ron?
I had to quarantine for 5.
Mm.
I mean, that was the doctor's orders, but I still just couldn't get up and roll. I like that next day I got up and I was good for about 10 minutes and I had to lay back down from a respiratory standpoint. And I'm not in marathon shape, but still I get out and run. But when that hit me, it just like I walked up the stairs to drop something off one of my daughter's rooms like 3 days later. And I was winded by the time I got up there. It definitely hit the respiratory system. And it still, I can feel it, but I haven't started running back or anything. I
But
can do more, but I do get tired sooner.
that goes to that return to office initiative
Yeah.
that maybe a lot of leaders aren't thinking about. If the employees that they're requiring to come back to the office end up with COVID, then number one, they're going to be out for 5 days, and we never can say how it's going to affect. So that may be another 5 to 10 days.
Oh,
And
yeah.
if they aren't showing any symptoms, they come to the office, then who are they infecting in the process? That's just something that needs to be considered. I am a fan and a proponent of remote work or hybrid to a certain extent as well, but it's just something that they need to consider because we're still dealing with this, and while we are still dealing with it largely on the global scale that we were in 2020 and 2021, we are still dealing with it, and it's causing some major issues for individual employees. So that's
I
something
mean,
for them to
I
consider.
understand the point of going into the office and meeting with your team and all that other stuff, but I don't think it needs to happen every day, especially with teams being spread across the country, the globe, or whatever.
That's something that a lot of companies are changing to not have those widely distributed teams. I've seen it in quite a few job descriptions where, and this, it is an annoyance for me. So I'll just use Chicago. They'll say Chicago, Illinois, remote. But what they mean is the position is not remote. What it is you need to be within the Chicago area, and you may be able to work remote. Y'all need to change that, because if it's remote, then it's remote. Don't put remote out there. But if it's in Chicago, all you have to do is add it to the job description, local within the Chicago area. It will save a lot of people job seekers time, as well as time for recruiters or them going through their applicant tracking system to remove people.
I mean, that's just some of the things I've noticed about the ATSs in the last 4.5 months. I mean, you just think about it though. There was posts that I was saying earlier this last week. There's jobs that are still open that were open when we got laid off. It makes no sense. And they keep reposting the same job. With the number of people that have hit the market, you're telling me that you can't find one person?
Those are ghost jobs.
They might be ghost jobs, but the other thing I've noticed is that there are, let's just say, for instance, from the TA perspective, I'm seeing who's actually recruiting for those roles. And I'm doing the networking. I'm reaching out to the people that are supposedly this role would report up to. And I've gotten some responses back. But those responses are like, well, one of our recruiting team members will reach back out to you. And I'm like, well, hold on. Why is a recruiter recruiting for their own leader? Like, that's a conflict in itself. And a lot of times you don't know if those people are gunning for that job, the number of applicants that are hitting their ATSs. And some of these jobs that have been open for the last 4.5 months, 5 months, 6 months, like, what's going on? If it's not a real job, put it on there. Say, hey, we're not readily hiring for it right now, but we are taking applicants for the future. Put that in the job description.
We know it's flawed, and a lot of reason is people will say time. People will say, we want to keep everything the same and we don't want to change outside of the template for how the job description and the posting is distributed and advertised. So that's where I said time and processes. And I would say people just generally aren't thinking about it. And here's the other thing too, and this is really no disrespect to any leaders, hiring managers, or recruiting and talent acquisition teams. But generally, they aren't great storytellers. So they don't necessarily know how to share the story and communicate.
I think another part of it is a lot of companies have started using AI as a means to an end versus using it as a tool. It should speed up processes, but it's not going to do the work for them. You still have to be able to identify who a good candidate is, who isn't. Just because somebody worked at the same company as one of our people that worked here recently doesn't mean they're at the same caliber, doesn't mean that they're qualified to do the role that they need them to do. TA is still one of those things that I don't think AI is actually going to take away, because there's a real human element to it.
We talked about this in our AI episode, and Ron, I definitely would love to hear your take on AI. But the issue goes to what I was talking about before. People will use it based on what they feel is going to save them time, what's going to make it easier. And a lot of people don't think about the human element. That's part of the big problem.
I completely agree, but here's the thing: when a manager is looking to hire someone, they don't have 90% of the time, they don't have time to shift through those resumes. And if you depend on a computer to go, this person's a great fit, the probability of that happening is going to be wrong. Like, even with ChatGPT, it's a cognitive AI. And what that basically means is it understands what you're asking it, but it doesn't have the capabilities of just searching it out on their own. GPT-4, GPT-5, none of those do. It still has to be prompted in order for it to give you some kind of result. And GPT-4 right now, it's tied into multiple different databases and multiple different things directly off of Google or all these other search engines, but it's still not sentient enough to go, this is the right person. And if you start doing that, you're going to silo yourself off. You still need someone that is an expert in that trade to be able to understand, okay, this is actually simplifying certain things for me, but it's not identified. And you can confuse it.
I agree. It can't determine if this person, what type of personality a person has. So I agree. I definitely agree with that. I do have an issue though. When you say managers don't have time, that's to me, part of the bigger problem. When we say hiring managers don't have time, that's when they need to make time. You make time to not go through the resumes. You do need someone to to help with the heavy lift. However, make the time to review them yourself. Make the time to dig a little bit deeper, because it's not just affecting the work that that particular role plays. It also reflects the larger team and whatever product and service is supported by whatever you do.
No, I agree with that. That's what I mean, though, is like the manager doesn't have time to do the recruiter's job. They have to focus on either getting the product ready, either doing the revisions, looking at the code, whatever they got to do. They need to focus on their job. And as of right now, a lot of managers out there are extremely shorthanded. They're having to make do with what they got. And so how do you supplement that? It's not an AI tool. It just won't be.
I mean, at every level, people are looking for filters or funnels, right? Just take this big mass and cut it down for me. Don't care if it's a sourcer, a recruiter, an AI application or platform. I mean, they don't care. Just make the pile smaller so I can get through it. Doesn't mean that it's right. Doesn't mean that whatever that filter was left the best ones behind. I mean, they won't ever know. I mean, right? The managers never know. They know what they've got in front of them. Assume this is the best, and I'll go from there. From an AI standpoint with this, it's really the same thing with just a different name, right? We've got all these people search platforms that have filters you can use to build in. I mean, it's going to return. AI is just like anything else. It's whatever you tell it is how it's going to work. The platform, that's what it's going to go do its filtering on. So, I mean, I think it can do like any of these other ones, right? It can take a big pile and narrow it down based on criteria that some human has put in there, but that's got to be monitored and evolved and changed all the time based on the results you're getting back. I mean, I know we play with some AI stuff here on just on my kids' quizzes and things and getting her ready, and things at college. And you get tons of return wrong answers back from using Chat GPT or whatever, right? I mean, it's going based on what it's been told or shown. And then you go look and it's wrong. So you're gonna get a lot of wrong stuff just like anything else. But
Well, that kind of
it's
goes
like from
back
the
to
beginning of computers, junk in, junk out, right? Ever since the beginning.
well, it's kind of like what we're talking about with these ATS systems, right? Like they're configured in a way that makes sense to the person doing the searching. But for the mass majority of people that are applying for these jobs, they don't know how this thing is configured. They don't know what parameters it's looking for. And the only thing you could hope to do with your resume is put in as many junk keywords as you possibly can based on the job description. And then even then you get rejected. So then you're kind of like, well, what exactly is the criteria that this thing is looking at? I can tell you right now, there's been one job that I've probably applied to 7 different times over the last 2.5 months, right? Revising my resume, looking at the job description, completely revising like what the keywords are in there, doing all of these different things. You're kind of like, all right, what exactly is going on? And it's not even like, rejected after 3 or 4 or 5 days. It's like, boom, auto rejected.
Use the hot button. You used a hot word, and that was configured. And a lot of it comes down to when companies purchase an applicant tracking system, whether it's out of the box or software as a service or a combination, it has to be configured. And not only that, it has to be reconfigured as things change. I think what a lot of people don't realize from the human resources standpoint, because talent acquisition and recruiting falls under human resources. So they're the ones that sign off on the budget on that purchase. It does require them to go back, do the configuration, identify what they're looking for.
So a lot of times the people that are doing the configuration aren't the recruiters. It's not even somebody on the TA team. It's somebody that's part of TA ops that's doing it. And what I mean by that is like if somebody's never recruited and they just kind of set around parameters of how this thing is supposed to work. But again, it's not going into the mind of the recruiter that actually needs to do this. I mean, there was a lot of times where even simple Boolean strings wouldn't really work into the ATS, and that didn't make any sense to me. Like if this is a database that we should be able to search for candidates in, or let's just say we've got 1,000 different resumes that are hitting, how do we narrow that down?
One of the things that I've seen is that you talked about TA ops. A lot of companies don't have a talent acquisition operations team or people. So if they aren't savvy in configuring that new ATS, they're going to give it to IT, or they may allow it to be done by the company that's selling it, and they're going to get a brief tutorial on it. And then there's no one that's the expert on the team that becomes responsible for it. So they really don't know the full capability of what the ATS is. When we're talking about the configuration of an applicant tracking system once it's purchased, it has to be looked at constantly. So from the standpoint of job seekers who are trying to get through the ATS, yeah, you can put a bunch of keywords in it, but it's not necessarily intuitive to know like the apples to apples. If I'm an account executive, I like to use this as an example because are you looking for title? Are you looking for a description? Are you having the conflict of, wait a minute, this title, the description doesn't reach this title? There's so many different challenges to the applicant tracking system and how it's reading that resume and the content in it. It's a challenge, a huge challenge.
You can depend on AI and do all of these other things, but that's exactly what the AI is looking for. Specific titles, keywords, whatever. And then even then when it's not happening, and then you're dependent on a person that may or may not be qualified enough to like look at the resume and go, it's exactly the same thing, just the title's a little different. Maybe they have done it. It's that kind of thing. Oh, well, I need to go find a director. Oh, but this person's only been a manager. Okay, well, what have the person done over the last 5, 6, 7 years that relates to what's going on with this? That's what I'm saying. It's kind of gotten away from that.
I don't think it was ever there, in all honesty. And for some, and I'm just saying this because I work for a recruitment marketing agency that did it all. So they did recruitment marketing, they did multicultural diversity, they had the online job board, they did it all. And they also had an applicant tracking system, one of the first ones out there in the marketplace. This has been over almost 30 years now to see how some tools don't evolve as the market evolves. So when we talk about what were they supposed to do, initially it was a repository of resumes. So you bring them in, and then you have this space within it that you can go in and you can search a repository of those resumes that have come in, regardless of the job. And then you can go search by whatever parameters, find it, and then look at it from there. Now it's very directed, but the applicant tracking system doesn't align to each one of those positions or the department for that matter.
I'll take it even one step further. The people that are selling this platform to you, they don't even know half the things that it could do. I had so many conversations with our rep, and I would be told that, hey, we've got a database where you can go in and search for it. And I'm like, you don't know? I had to become a SME very quickly. I got on because like there was no way to actually do reporting because like some of our stakeholders would start asking us questions in regards to, well, how many people have actually applied, what's going on, what have we moved, and there was no way to actually pull that because reporting wasn't actually built into the platform or configured like it should have been. So I had to go figure it out. There's people configuring this that don't necessarily understand exactly what goes into certain roles in order for them to get the biggest audience or the biggest qualified audience.
A lot of times those are just like in the electronics you buy, your television or whatever that has so many functions. Unless you sit down and take the time to read everything in there and do it, I mean, you're going to use just a fraction of the functions. So they're just not, which again comes to the front end of the builders of the applications really finding out what's important to the users versus something that's cool. It's like any software, right? I mean, all the engineers want to, you want to give it, or not just software, but any product that's built by an engineer, give it everything you can put into it, right? That's cool. Put it in there. Is it really needed? Maybe, maybe not, but it fills up the instruction manual more, right? So you just have so many functions. And I think that's a problem. That ties in with everything you guys have just talked about, right? You get a function that you found that's in there, you've learned how to use it, that person configures it and leaves or is no longer there, and then nobody knows. You start assuming that this is just the way it is. This is a built-in, it's the way we do it. And it goes back to what you're talking about, Nicole. You have to have a constant refresh or reevaluation of how you've got it configured, which would probably mean you need to have a lot more people trained in those capabilities. And like I said, it's overkill with so many of them. They have so much stuff that you're just like, oh, screw it. Let me just go figure out how to do it manually myself. And you're right, the reps don't know, so there's no point asking there. And if you don't ask it just right in the fact section of these applications, you're not going to find it, or you find 10 pages of stuff that you don't want to take time to read. So
Yeah.
maybe that's where AI could help.
I think a lot of it is that people are trying to build their processes around a platform they don't know how to use versus creating their process and then configuring the platform to their process.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the tail wagging the dog.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is then you're going to sit back and then hopefully this thing does what you want it to do. Or hopefully your people are capable of doing what this platform is configured in the way that it's configured, and then 9 times out of 10, it doesn't work. There's always so many people keep talking about breaks in a process. Well, no, it's not that. It's that your platform isn't configured to your process or the other way around. It is just not working.
Or there is no process.
Well, that too, yeah. And
And
then all dependent on the platform to do everything for them.
well, no. There is no process, meaning no one has ever thought about what is a process that we want for this, or the process changes based on the hiring manager, or or a budget, or it's something changes it. So there was never a process in the first place. So it's hard to configure the platform to the process because the process isn't even in place.
Build your process first. And once you have your process, find the ATS or configure your ATS to do that versus just trying to throw more money at it and hopefully something works.
Let's talk about money. When we're talking about money and purchasing an applicant tracking system, often, like you said, the choice is made not based on the process, but based on the tool, or or a really great salesperson. Give a shout out to the salespeople. Most of the time, it's tied to what's our budget. You're not really thinking about what do we need. And also, when I say this, what do we need, that is often looked at as what do we need right now versus what do
Or
we
what can we get by with?
What can we get by with? Not what do we need for the long term, and how to scale that tool, that program, that ATS to the future needs of the organization or where we want to grow, which goes back to a strategic plan. And this is why all departments, all leads need to talk to each other. And it shouldn't just be talking at the executive level. Someone said this on a summit I was watching, and it was actually Adam Grant said it. It ties back specifically to not just recruiting, but let's just talk about human resources overall, since recruiting is a big portion of HR. He said, no one should become a CEO until they've been a CHRO, until they've been a chief in the human resources or a people department. They should move to a chief executive officer position. I've never heard it before, but it makes sense because that's an area that, while we know human resources, talent acquisition, benefits, compensation is not a revenue generating department, it is critical to your revenue generating departments. So when we're talking about buying tools like an applicant tracking system, they don't necessarily understand what it can do, what it should do, and the overall benefits to the organization and the strategic plan if one exists.
I mean, it goes back to what I think you said, that it's not a revenue generation piece.
Mm-hmm.
So last to come, first to go. We just saw that, right? That with the layoffs, that's the area that got hit first. Over time, I mean, just from looking back at career, HR was just a small function because it was a cost center. And it has evolved. It has grown. It has become so much more powerful within an organization. It's taken on so many of those things that nobody else wants to do. And as long as things are going well, it's there. But let things get a little tight, you're going to hit those revenue generation pieces, cut them out, and and you don't see a lot of, from what you just said, you don't see a lot of people who come that path and end up being the CEO, right? I mean,
right.
It makes good sense, at least to spend a step of time there, but yeah, it's one of those when you know it's one of the first ones to get cut. why go that path and be there, right? Go to the one that's on the ship at the end and
Right.
making the decisions and the money. I mean, I agree with him, but yeah, you don't see it.
You guys watched the movie called Hunter Killer? It's the submarine captain. The military uses this kind of initiative that you're talking about. Like you want to be in every position before you can kind of try to lead people. And so in Hunter Killer, the movie, I guess he's the admiral or the captain of the sub. But the reason he commanded respect out of everybody in that submarine is because he's worked every position on that sub and he knows exactly the capabilities of that sub to a T. He's been on the radar. He's been the torpedo gunner. He's been the guy that, is the maintenance guy. He's done all of these different things. So he could give them proper direction in regards to what needed to be done in a timely manner. Same kind of thing.
Yeah, for something that's that big of a part of your organization, it's one of your biggest expenses. But like you said, it's what leads everything to the revenue generation. You would think that people would take more attention with and learning how that works and being better schooled in it, but just doesn't. It just does not.
The applicant tracking system is one of the things that any resume writer, any career coach is talking to people about when they're looking at their resume. And they're saying, how can you beat the applicant tracking system? I think one of the things that, and I've had the conversation as well, how can you beat the applicant tracking system? I've said that knowing that you really can't beat the applicant tracking system, you have to play the game. And so you're not beating it, but you need to understand there are several applicant tracking systems out there, from big mega ones like Oracle and ICIMS to some of the smaller ones that are, and I call them small, like Bamboo, Greenhouse. Those are smaller ones to me, even though they play a big role and a lot of recruiting teams really rely on them. There's so many different ones out there, and for candidates to understand that there's no amount of keywords that you can put in your resume that the applicant tracking system will say, oh my gosh, this is the right person. You could put the whole dictionary in your resume and it would still probably kick you out, because let's just say like this: it's not you, it's me, and I'm the applicant tracking system. It's not you, it's me. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to conform to something to get through the door. And if it's not going to work, it's not going to work. And I think I've mentioned this on a previous episode. With the agency I worked for, one of the services we provided was working with companies to have them understand their recruitment process, including how they advertise jobs and how they sourced and how they looked at resumes on the back end. Taking someone who already works for an organization, taking their resume and putting it through the process, seeing that they would be kicked out of the process as well. You already got the job, but if you had to go through it again, you wouldn't get it based on the way this is configured in the back end. So from a job seeker standpoint, what are some of the suggestions that you would give job seekers in applying now that they have a little bit more knowledge about applicant tracking systems, even though we have much more we could talk about? What are some of the things that you would suggest?
So, there was a time when I would say reach out to the hiring manager. But just with my experience right now, I got to admit that doesn't work.
Because everybody's reaching out to the hiring manager.
Yeah, everybody's overloaded.
So, I mean, my suggestion is probably to learn as much about the organization as you can. Reach out to other people that are outside of HR, or reach out to people that are either among the team or have a conversation, and just try to reach out to the organization that you're trying to work for. You still need to put like a wide net out there, but at the same time, like Nicole, you told me this, like pick 10 companies, target people in different departments of those companies, and start a conversation. Create noise, not around the company that you're applying to, but create your own personal brand. What do you want to be known for? Start projecting it. There's an easy way to do that these days on social media. Like, put your viewpoints out there and it will align with this organization. This is coming from somebody that's configured these ATS systems from Bullhorn to Greenhouse to Lever. Right now, it is a numbers game. Who did you work for in the past? Reach out to those individuals, even if they do or don't have a job. Put your name or put bug in their ear. There are things you can do to get visible. Don't try to stay behind the scenes and just hit quick apply. You got to take your shot and keep trying things. If you do something that's not working, change it. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over again.
With ATS is strictly just talking about how to navigate the ATS or become more visible or get past the filter or what have you. We talked about this before, is to look at the people working at that company in that position. People are pretty good these days about updating what they're doing on LinkedIn. Look at their LinkedIn profile and see what they say they're doing and try to replicate yours as close as you can to that into your resume and send it there. It's like you talked about, right? If your own people can't get through the ATS with what they're currently doing, and I'm not talking about what they did in the past, because like you said, those may not get through an ATS, but if you put what they're currently doing in your resume, if you've done it, it should have its best chance of getting through. And if it doesn't, then you've got an opportunity to reach out to somebody and say, look, my background is exactly like the guy in the role, or they came out of the role, or what you're asking for. Why am I not getting? And it may bring the attention to somebody within, whether it be TA, their hiring manager, or whatever, that hey, we do have people who are applying that are not getting through. There's something broken or that needs to be changed here. There's probably a lot of lack of awareness of how many things that these are screening out now, because they're getting, I mean, it's a grading system, right? From a percentage match standpoint. And because there's so many people out there right now, the percentages have gone up. You know, companies may or recruiters may have looked at, hey, this person's a 65 or 70% fit. I'm going to take my time to go through the resume. Now, because they're getting hit so much, they may be only looking at the 90 to 95% hits just to purely filter down the number of people and resumes they're looking at. So try matching it.
Yeah.
You know, match what's in there. I mean, it's tough. It's a numbers game at this point. There's so many, and
Yep.
I can guarantee you, not the best people are getting hired into these roles. It's just the first or the quickest or whatever hit my desk first, or there's some point of reference there. Hey, I see they work at a place I know of, a big name company or what have you, and people are grabbing those. I mean, everybody's just looking for more filters, faster filters, because you got fewer people doing that job and more things coming at them. I had one of my buddies reach out to me last week and said, he's recruiting at a place. He said, I've got to find another job because they are absolutely just killing me here. It's 24/7. There is no concern for the work. We did have a work-life balance. There's no work-life balance now. I have to be on all the time.
Yep.
You know, I mean, I said, well, you do have a job, but he said, I'd rather not. It's
Wow.
miserable.
Wow.
So I think there's a lot more of that going on out there and going to happen just out of the pure numbers piece of it.
Heard that too. There's a lot of people that are very disgruntled right now, even if they are employed, to the point where they're looking to the people that are unemployed. Not only are you competing with the people that are unemployed, but you're also competing with the people that are employed because of situations just like that. It is a numbers game. What I would suggest, like Ron said, try to mimic your resume as close to the job description as possible. Use tools like ChatGPT. Here's a prompt that I'll tell everybody that you can use for ChatGPT. ChatGPT, take a look at this job description, take a deep dive. Now take a look at my resume and cater my experience to this job description. That thing will spit out a resume that's really, really close to it.
But is it honest?
Yeah.
No. I'm not talking about the output from this advice. My position is, if you haven't done it, be honest that you haven't done that work.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You want your resume to mimic the job description based on your experience.
Okay.
You need to put that prompt in and it will cater your resume to that. Because if you just say, make my resume look like the job description, it'll do that. But yeah, that's not honest. But you need to say, cater the resume to the job description based on my past experience. Use the tools that are out there for your support, but don't be dishonest with it because it will catch up to you. That fake it till you make it type of scenario doesn't work anymore.
One of the things I've shared with some clients and some friends is the understanding that a lot of these recruitment and TA departments are reduced. They aren't as big as before. So when you think about the influx of resumes with a smaller team, it's harder to manage the work. And they were like, oh, I never thought about that. But also understanding that whether it's the process or tool, either one or both being broken, that team may not have anyone available to fix that broken process either. One thing that really bothers me, and it goes back to what I was talking about, a resume database that a company has, join our talent network. No, I want this job. I don't want to be a part of your network. I want the job that I applied to. But when you get the automated response from the applicant tracking system that says this position has been filled, remind me, I want to comment on that as well. The thing that I see is we'll keep your resume in our database for 6 months to a year, whatever the time frame, for additional opportunities that are available. Now, the applicant tracking system back in the day would be able to give that talent acquisition team and say, these are the people within your database that meet the criteria. This was before the job posting ever came to light and was ever advertised. People don't do that anymore. Or maybe I shouldn't say, because I don't know
Oh, no, they don't.
everybody in the world. But I don't think many do that anymore. So
Let's be real. They don't.
no, I want to be honest, because there may be one or two that does. But for the ones that I've seen, they don't do that anymore. They don't go back to their network, to their own internal database to see. And part of that may be because they feel like that, oh, that person applied 6 months ago. I'm sure they're hired now. Well, you know, one way to find out, call them or email them.
Yeah.
That would be a thing.
I don't want to knock on it, but yes, that's what they should do. But here's the, like you said, a person's experience can change vastly within a year or 6 months. Things that they're doing, things that they're not doing. And you got to take a look at it and say, well, human nature. Do I reach out to this person or do I just go find someone else?
You reach out to the person who applied to the company because they were interested in the company at one time. You could have been one of their top choices. So reach out and see. And here's the other thing with reaching out. You reach out, and if they're not available, but they're in that department, they have the skills, they may be the perfect person to have a current referral for you.
That's true, but when they're, and again, playing devil's advocate here, but when you have recruiters that are held to certain metrics and KPIs, for instance, time to fill, time to hire, cost to hire, all these different things that they're trying to compete against, reaching out to people that did apply, maybe employ, they don't want to leave because they found a great job. I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios, and I agree that they should. It's just that these are the types of things that people deal with.
And again, why my suggestion holds more water.
No, I agree, but that's what I'm saying is they don't. It doesn't happen because of the KPIs and metrics that we've established for our TA teams. That it's the type of issues that they face.
Well, and there's a badge of honor too now, or a badge of shame if you don't dig up somebody new. Bring somebody new to the table. Just remember both sides of it, right? People who dug somebody up out of the thing, it was not as cool as you didn't add value to the database. You didn't bring somebody new to the database versus you found the right person for the job. So like it goes along with what AJ's talking about. What criteria are we using for managing and measuring with recruiters?
I do agree that if you're going to hold people's resumes in your database, search those, see what happened, but then also look at it and be like, well, why wasn't the person good enough the first time around?
One of the things I was saying before about the automatic response, while there still are a lot of automated responses, they're tweaking them a little bit. Some of those rejections are a little bit tweaked where they feel a little bit more personal. Ron, what would be one of your suggestions for someone dealing with the applicant tracking system?
I mean, the pure numbers show that you can't take it personal, right? It's not you. It's not because you're not a fit, or it's not a definite that you're not a fit. A lot of it just simply has to do with volume and the internal capabilities of getting through to those. You know, it's like I mentioned before. I think you can do everything you can in trying to make your application look as much like those who are already in those positions? And if that doesn't get you there and match it, then that's about as far as you can take the ATS piece. Anything around that has to come through finding ways to interact with the people portion of it versus the ATS, right? And that's where we talked about trying to connect the dots in between or reach out to somebody to get them to notice your resume or pull it to the forefront. I know I had that happen many times to where they can make that connection and get to me and say, hey, I've submitted to this and I think I'm a good fit, but they were buried under 400 other resumes. So that would then make me go look and either agree or disagree with it. But yeah, the ATS piece is just, you can only control so much of that. Just try to make yourself look as like, be the chameleon to match the job description and the people who work there, and about as far as you can take that thing.
Look, we only scratched the surface in talking about applicant tracking systems. They are tricky and can be a barrier to any job seeker applying for their dream job. We wanted to give you some insight into this area. Whether it's an easy resume upload, a manual application, or resume parsing, each system is as different as a recruiting department using it. And speaking of different, we know you can listen to Tip That Scale on several different platforms. Wherever you may be listening, please like, subscribe, and follow. And don't forget to follow @Tip That Scale on Instagram and Twitter.